like, you know, movement action have just yes, it's an extra system,
a rework of the action system.
Well, so
in general,
and before we move on to Charger, this is kind of the same discussion Matt and I had, and I think the four of us had, right? Where it's like, you don't want to add too many buttons. Well, it's like, well, yeah,
you want to have the right amount of buttons.
There's a sweet spot of buttons.
So specifically, we're talking about the weapon options for Midgard, right? Where it's like, well, you don't want to hit them with too many buttons, and it's like, wow, I went from one button to 2 whole buttons. That's crazy. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, some people do find that crazy, and it's kind of sad, but
it is, right? But like, we should not be catering the game. I hate to say it like this, but to those people, because
that's we're canceled. So thanks everybody for coming out here. Have a good night.
The fact of the matter is, like, there is a tactical aspect to the game,
but this is
a combat-oriented game, so you can't take the tactics out of it.
Right. I do not fully disagree with you. I'm going to preface what I'm about to say with that. But the problem with not catering to one section means you cater to the other, which means that you push all those people out. That's how that ends up working.
My argument was going to be that when they were designing 5th edition originally, after the debacle that was 4th edition, they kind of were trying to cater to those people. That was the point, right? They wanted to cater to those people that think 2 actions,
which is why people
they wanted to cater to the people who think 2 options is too many, right? Like,
but
that's the thing.
I'm almost willing to argue that people like that, they want more things to do, but they don't know it, right? Like, how many times if you run a game for somebody and they're like, oh, well, I want to attack, obviously, and you're like, okay, cool, roll your attack, you do the thing, and they're like, is there anything else I can do? I want to go, like, talk to this guy, or I want to, like, tell him to stop fighting, and you're like, no, well, you can't do that because that would have been your action. It's like, well, what is this bonus action thing? You're like, oh, you don't get those, that's not for you.
You're not a rogue.
Yeah, so like, I'm willing to maybe some people will disagree with you, but my crackpot theory is more people do want more options. They just don't want the options thrown to them in a fucking bizarre, weirdly, like, convoluted way.
Well,
that's part of what we're doing
all
here.
At once.
All at once. It's like Matt said the secret. They don't want it all at once. That's the thing. Yeah. Right? Think about video games, right? This is really where we can take a good lesson. Is the problem is not necessarily that people don't want to have a lot of things to do. I think you're correct, Isaiah, that a lot of players do want to have multiple options. But when you're first starting the game, you want to have minimal choices so you can ease your way in. You know, when you first start Elden Ring, you don't want 36 different sword options. You want one, maybe you pick up a second one along the way, and you use that for a good 5 hours until you beat Godfrey, and then you start finding more weapons.
Kind of, sort of, right? Like, that's where the really cool thing about new players comes in, because they will just say and ask for fucking anything because they don't really know what they can.
Well, in a tabletop context, yes, there is that side of it. But from the just talking about the mechanics as they are on paper, I think the thing that would help is you start with less options and your options grow as you go, which is kind of what we're gonna get with the feats being reworked. So I don't know, maybe when you're level 1 to 3, you don't get bonus actions, and level 3 you unlock bonus actions. Like, I don't know.
I'm gonna be real.
I know that sounds crazy.
In this hypothetical universe,
no, I think that would be more confusing.
I know that sounds crazy, but I'm just saying, like, something weird.
I get a subclass and a bonus action.
In this hypothetical universe that you've just propositioned to me,
too many options.
If somebody was like, "Hey, I want to run a new campaign," I'm like, "Awesome," and they're like, "Okay, so it's gonna be 1 to," I'm like, "Nope, I'm already out." And they're like, "What do you mean you're out?" I'm like, "I'm not doing level 1 to 3. I'm not doing that. That's not happening."
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. We're talking about if you're a new player, right? Not presuming that you already know how to play. We're talking about when you're coming in as a fresh player and you don't have that understanding. Then starting at level 1 sounds perfectly reasonable. And the designers themselves have said, if you know how to play the game, don't start at level 1. They've said it a million times.
Sure, but so you're under the assumption that you only have teams of veterans or teams of newbies, where realistically you have a mix a lot of the time.
You do have a mix, but I'm talking about the onboarding experience. Yes, you do have a mix, but from an onboarding standpoint, I think the problem is they went, okay, too many options bogs down new players. They don't know what to do. So instead, we're gonna soak everything in, focus everything down the hall. We're going to give the players not a ton of options. We're going to give them one action, and we're just going to stay in that lane because otherwise they get overwhelmed. Whereas what I think but then what you, like you said, what ends up happening is new players start playing and then they start being like, well, can I do something else? And then your response has to be no. Whereas if there was some sort of onboarding design where it starts simpler and then grows out, then you could do something later down the road. That's all I'm talking about. The idea of like having a mix of old and new players and who wants what and all that is like, that's not like, I'm just talking about this idea of the onboarding, which all spread from using an action for a jump is too much, but because the game only really gives you that one option of action or bonus, we're in kind of a tight spot. You know, like
maybe, I don't know.
I'm trying to give you your cake and eat it too here, Chief.
I mean, you sort of are, but not really. But anyway,
I am though. No, I am because I'm saying, because my point is, because there is an argument to be made that having things be more simple helps with new player onboarding, right? That is a true statement, which is part of the success of why 5e is doing so well. Yes, Matt?
No, I was just saying, hi, me.
Yeah. Right? That is an absolutely true thing. But it is also true that after you've played for a little while, you start to want more stuff, right?
So, yeah. Okay. So this is all I want to say before we move on to Charger, because we've been on Actor for about 20 minutes now.
I mean, we're not talking about Actor at all at this point, but yeah.
I mean, but we haven't touched on it
so much.
But we've been in the weird nebulous area.
Yes. All I will say, my last point on this will be, don't remove options for veterans. Just make them optional for newbies.
That's what I'm saying. That's what that new player onboarding would be. Start with less, grow into more.
Well, no. What I'm saying is start with all of it. Let beginners know they don't got to use any of it.
But you can already do that by just starting at a higher level, right? Like if they locked things behind levels, then veteran players would just start at higher levels, which is kind of what they already do anyway.
Yeah, except if you're stuck with a group of newbies, I don't want to get punished.
Well, if you're stuck with a group of newbies, you have to make the concession that you're playing with a bunch of newbies, and you have to make a compromise. Either you accept the compromise of playing with new players, or you don't play with new players. Like that's a different thing.
The compromise is that new players, if they want to get super into it, can get into the nitty gritty. This is the same thing with the Midgard hero stuff.
Yeah,
put the weapon options on the table. Say, here they are. These are for you to use. Don't use them. I don't give a shit. But they're there. So people, like me, like other tactical players, who can go, oh, cool. So I'm just going to use these all the fucking time then. And the jam goes, all right, cool.
I don't know if that's really. I don't know if that's doable to be like, here's all these options. If you want to use them, you can. If not, don't. And like then the new player sitting at the table of like the veteran player sitting with all the new players doing a bunch of crazy shit while the new players are sitting there not sure what to do. I don't know if that's a better scenario. I think everyone's either on the level or everyone's like, you got to all be within the same zone of complexity. I don't think it's fair that the veteran player gets to play with the more complicated toys just because they know what they're doing.
Well, that's literally what, like, how I don't see why not, right? Because what that does is that creates a healthy amount of FOMO where the newbie goes, wait, how did you just do that? And you go, oh, well, you use this as your bonus action because that lets you do this.
Or it creates a healthy amount of jealousy and fuck it, this game sucks, I'm out.
I mean,
it could go either way. That's the problem. It could go the way you described, but it could go the other way.
I'm going to be honest. I think treating players different based on their skill level is the inappropriate way to go about it.
Yeah.
I think everything should just be available. I don't think that limiting newbies is anything. I think that newbies should be given a healthy amount of help from their DM to understand what they're playing, to understand how to build a character and all of this. I don't, and like, I'm not coming out of here and like being like, anti whatever or aggressive. I think that separating players into categories is how you end up with people doing it themselves and then starting groups and hating other people. This is what happens with video games, where we have the competitive esports crowd versus the casual crowd, and then the game caters to the esports players, and then the games usually turn to like dead player bases with only the people that are in the top of the top playing. So like it's just, I've seen this kind of mentality happen before, and it's just not. It usually ends in disaster.
Yes. Well, so look. Yes, I understand. I'm not saying to limit anything for anybody. What I'm saying is you put them on the table, and if players don't want to use them, right? Like I have players in my game who don't play a lot, and they don't use the more complex stuff because they don't want to. It's too complicated for them. That's fine. They don't have to. And I've never made a single encounter that banks on a complex mechanic because that's a dickhead thing to do. I wouldn't do that to anybody, and you shouldn't. But much like the weapon rules, you put them on the tables for the people who want to use them. So I'm not saying limit anything for anybody. I'm saying make these things available to everybody, but make the system available so that new players who don't want to don't have to. But they're still there.
I have more counter than this, but I'm gonna move it on.
I mean, I think that's just what feats are for.
I do. Yeah,